Welcome to the Bound to be Rich podcast, where I attempt to reverse engineer people who seem to be successful no matter the circumstances so that you can apply those lessons to your own life. I'm your host, Ismail Himet. One quick thing before we get started. I am starting my own email newsletter, and I would love for you to join it. It's going to be like a personal note for me to my friends of all the best things I've come across that month. From hacks and tips, interesting stories, products, books, ways to make money, and who knows what else. It's totally free. And if you don't like it, you can always opt out at any time, so there's no downside. The link to join is in the show notes, and I hope to see you on the list. In this episode, we are joined by Bryan, also known as Gigamute, another successful trader from the financial cloud community. On top of having some monster wins in trading over the last year, Bryan is also a successful entrepreneur who just had his company acquired. We dig into his journey as a trader and entrepreneur, and we discuss a ton of things like how he saw COVID coming through his business dealings with China, inflation's impact on the economy and financial markets, what makes a trader successful, his advice to aspiring traders, and much, much more. Let's dive in. Bryan, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate you making the time.
You bet. I'm excited to talk about it.
I'm excited as well, and I think, why don't we first start, if you don't mind, just telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in trading.
Yeah, so when you think of the financial cloud, I'm probably on the upper end of the age group There's a lot more, I guess, young traders on that Discord. I started my own business about 6-7 years ago, and in contract manufacturing, and had some success there, and recently sold it to a company, and found myself, looking to keep myself busy and learn something new. And so with some of the assets that I acquired there, I started to get into trading really back in the spring of 2020. Actively, I've always invested, but never, as active as I've been in the past couple of years. So I started to get involved and really started finding people on Twitter and started to follow them. And I obviously didn't want to just take anybody's advice that you read online, and came across a couple of people that I found had success, and they had some logic and reason behind what they were doing, and that led me to the Discord, and then ultimately becoming a part of a member of the financial cloud. So that's how I got into it. I've just like anybody else in trading, you have ups and you have downs, and it's good to have people online so that you can not only learn, but you can also understand where what you did well, what you didn't, and be able to understand kind of the psyche behind what it takes to be a trader.
I love that you said that there's ups and downs. That's one of the things I'd like to talk about in the show, is that it's made to seem to be so easy. Everyone just makes millions of dollars, and it's really not that simple. I wish it was. What is contract manufacturing, by the way? What's that business that you started?
Yeah, so contract manufacturing is where I have equipment and capabilities to manufacture products for brands, right? So I do a lot of food and beverage type packaging in flexible packaging. So if you see baby food at the grocery store, or energy gels for endurance athletes, it's flexible packaging. I get the ingredients, I pasteurize it, and then I put it into the pouch. So that's what contract manufacturing is. The brands don't have the capital and or the will to get the equipment to manufacture, so they'll go out and have someone else do it for them.
And you specialize in those kinds of edible or beverage things, or do you do like more physical, hard products as well?
Yeah, it's almost all liquid or puree or gels. So that's the area of business that I was in. Before that, I was did quite a bit of work in the medical device and new product development. Had some great success there, and took ideas and concepts in medical devices from concept all the way to FDA approval and implementation. And so with that, I was able to understand where business opportunities are, and to be able to assess and put a business plan together, and raised about $25 million to build up a plant from scratch. And that's kind of what I was able to accomplish.
So you seem to have a very entrepreneurial past. Do you find any correlation with trading? Has anything that you learned as an entrepreneur helped you with trading, or is it just totally different?
No, I mean, every day's new, right? And you know what? And just like with being an entrepreneur, you've got challenges that come up. You've got situations where you win, and you got situations where you lose, and you've got to go back to in essence, belief in yourself. You've created a hypothesis or a business plan that's based off some assumptions. So there is some correlation there. I mean, the way you execute it is completely different, and you've got to be able to make some decisions. At least in the way that I trade, you've got to be able to make decisions quickly, because in this market, particularly this year, it's been choppy. So you can be up 20% and then go get a drink, and I've done that. I've had really expensive Coke Zeros where I go get a fountain drink, and I come back and I'm like, are you kidding me? And then you learn that I didn't have a stop loss on, or I overestimated the momentum where it's going, and then I find out that Coke Zero was more than $1.50.
So. I've had very similar experiences, but you seem like a very accomplished guy, very smart guy. Is it weird? And I'm oversimplifying here, but is it weird to kind of be learning from young, for lack of a better word, kids? Not that they're kids.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. I don't think I'm the smartest guy. I think that the reality is that there's always something you can learn from someone, right? And whether there be their education, their background, where they come from, age. There's something to be garnered if you're paying attention to it. And to be honest, I kind of like the fact that there's young guys out there. I'm the boomer. I don't go out there and tell them that I'm the boomer, because once they see this, they're gonna be like, oh my gosh, digging you, what are you doing? And I like it. I like their energy. I like the fact that they're hungry. Everybody's got different motivations as to why they're trading, and so. Even if I'm not making trades, I like listening to their logic. I like listening to their banter. So yeah, no, I mean, you have to check your ego at the door if you're going to trade. Period. And I'm acting like I've been doing this for a long time. I haven't. But if you think you're smarter than everybody else, then you're going to find yourself drinking your own Kool-Aid. And particularly when you've got to make assumptions, just like starting my business, I had to have people tell me what was working, what's not, and you need mentors. And so, if you try something new, I don't care what it is, whether it's cycling or trading or whatever, you have to take people's input.
Yeah, I find that most successful people have that mentality where they're always looking to learn. They don't think they're above anybody. Doesn't matter. And like the great thing about the market is that it doesn't care how old you are, what race you are, where you're from. The market does not care. It treats everyone equally.
Great equalizer. Yeah, and that's what really I like that. I mean, I've been telling. I've got 3 kids. So I've got some of my kids are almost honestly as old as those. Some of the guys on Discord, and I want them to learn. I wish I had learned some of the fundamentals that they have at their age. It would have changed, I'm not saying I wouldn't necessarily have gone out and been an entrepreneur, but it would have changed my perspective on investments, and the value, and what's a win and what's not. And it's something I hope, honestly, to get my my kids involved and trade. It's one of the reasons why I want to learn, is so that I can pass that on as well.
That's fascinating to hear, because a lot of people in your generation, because I know I used to work on Wall Street, and I had these mentors that were like, don't trade. This was a while ago, not the craziness that we have now. And I was given books on index investing, index funds. So I learned like value investing, and that's what I've done for the better part of the last like 15, 20 years. So it was always grilled into me, it's too risky to trade. You can't win by trading. But now you have this experience, and you want to teach your kids to do it. What do you see that these other, for lack of a better term, boomers are missing?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily. I wouldn't put it as a zero sum and saying that they're missing something, right? Because I think there's value in different ways that what your objectives are, what you want to do. But what I would say is, because there's so many different types of traders, right? There's day traders where they're trading every 5 minutes, and there's also people who are doing swings over extended periods of time. There's different ways to approach it, right? But what I hope to, that they get is they understand that they don't have to be passive, right? They don't have to just sit down and just take what a mutual fund is going to provide and just say, okay, your expectation is that you're going to get 7 or 8% a year, and you're not going to be able to do better than that. And I just think that if you have belief in yourself, you're willing to learn, and to the point where you're willing to listen, regardless of where it comes from, as we just talked about. I just think that there's an opportunity for them to get more, and that's what I think is so intriguing. And at this, when I listen to these guys, I know there's going to be people who are going to fail. There's going to be people who are going to lose it all. I'm certain that's going to happen. But there are also people out there who are going to do better than they would have otherwise, and that changes their lives, right? And so, you hear that all the time on Discord, and it's not to be cliche about it or to say that that's the case, but I think there's situations, if they handle it right, meaning they don't get overly greedy and they recognize that they've won. That's one of the key things, right? That can change people's lives, and they could come from poverty, or they could come from a lower middle income and be able to put themselves on a path to financial freedom. And once you have financial freedom, that doesn't bring happiness. It sure takes a lot of your stresses away on everyday life, right? And that to me is kind of the goal here, and that's why I want to pass that on to my my kids and get them involved. But you got to manage your emotions. It's hard, and I'll be honest. That's one of the weaknesses I have in the trading is discipline.
Same, and it's like it's kind of like I remember when I was working in Wall Street, and I used to see these senior executives always working on their golf putting in the office. It's like, and they said that you can always get better. You can always improve your putt, and I feel like that's how trading is. Like you're never there. You can always get better.
No, well, it's because every day is different, right? And every dynamic's different, and you've got to everything's different about it. Who you're working with, what you're working with. It's just different.
So with what you've seen so far, I know you said you just sold your business, but I think you're still obligated to continue working there for now. So I assume that trading is not yet your full-time income. Do you see it being your full-time income afterwards?
If I get good at it. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not doing well, but I'd want to have a lot more confidence. The one thing I do like about being an entrepreneur or being in a business, operating a business, is the interaction with people, face to face, right? And being able to see things work in its place. Not saying that you can't get that same satisfaction in trading, but I don't know. I mean, maybe 5 years from now or something along those lines, we'll see where it goes, but probably not right now.
Yeah, and
I use it means as to supplement, and more honestly, education. Mm-hmm. It's an expensive education, and so I want to put it to work, and definitely want to supplement what I have.
It's definitely, it can be a very expensive education, but like you were alluding to before, that if you stay alive long enough and you manage your risk properly and you get that one trade that you were saying can change your life, it's pretty hard to screw that up if you have the proper risk management and mindset, because I've seen it myself. I've had some ridiculous wins over the last year, and I was never really trading. I was always more of an investor until right after COVID. But one thing I'm curious about from your point of view as a business owner, because I've been beating the drum about this for like over a year and a half, 2 years, is inflation and the negatives of that, which are already mostly here and probably, in my opinion, going to continue. Have you seen inflation impact? Do you think that?
Oh man, yeah, I have, and it's. I mean, I deal with it on a daily basis, right? And I'm dealing with food that's being delivered to Costco or to your local grocery store. Inflation's real, and it's not going away anytime soon. And so this is probably where you're going. The idea that you're going to get inflation at 3% over the next few years, that's not the reality. And if you're not getting a greater yield than that, then you're losing. Yep. But inflation. I mean, I could go on. We could take this entire podcast. I could talk to you about what I'm seeing. And it's across the board, and it's not just in material costs, it's labor, right? So we have some intensive labor steps in our operation, and we're seeing 20, 30, 40% increases in wages above and beyond what we were getting, say, 18 months ago. So, and it's, and that, in food and in contract manufacturing, it's not like I'm, where I was in medical devices had an 80+% margin. I don't have that. So, the only way you can absorb those type of increases is through price increases, and that has to be passed on ultimately to the consumer. So it's real. I think it's going to affect the stock market. I am not long-term bullish on the market. I think there's some headway that's going to come here that's going to manifest itself over the next 12 to 24 months.
I would agree. Is that part of the reason why you decided to sell your business?
No. Candidly, I had a lot of exposure to China. I saw COVID coming. Again, there's another podcast I could tell you about. I saw COVID coming in December of 2019 because most of my business was we take ingredients from China and manufacture it here in the United States because they want food manufactured in the United States because of the quality and the standards we have here, and then I would ship it back, or they would ship it back. But in 2019, I saw some crazy things that that just didn't make any sense. Where communication went dark. I couldn't get materials off Long Beach port. They were quarantined by the CDC in January, late January 2020. They wouldn't give me a reason or indication why. And 2 of the 11 ingredients in that container were from Wuhan itself. And they incinerated it. They didn't even gamma irradiate it. So, I was seeing these telltale signs from supply chain in China, wow. And I knew this was coming like a freight train. So ultimately, I got a little bit cold feet and a little bit nervous. And so, the board and I decided that it was best, given the uncertainty of what was coming, to sell, and we had a great operation. So had I known that there was going to be some of the government subsidies in place, I probably wouldn't have sold. But at the time, it's like trading, right? I mean, you're at this critical pivot point on a chart, and you don't know if it's going to break down or if it's going to break up. And some of the indicators were saying, hey, it's going down, so you sell. And then the reality is, looking back, because manufacturing has boomed actually since COVID has hit, and I would have never in a million years guessed that. So it's just, honestly, it's not much different than trading itself. But you can't look back, right? You can't say, "Hey, oh man, if I would have just only held on," because you're dealing in real time. You can learn from it, and that's important. You've got to go back and understand. You've got to check your ego. You got to say, what did I do, and what were the signs that I misread? And there's certainly some in my own business, and like trading, you see it as well.
That's super interesting, because the timeline that you outlined there, I think that's before people were made aware of the severity of COVID in the media. Like that was even January when you saw the supply chain issues. So you saw this firsthand before it was a big deal.
I did, and in fact, this is me speculating. I don't want to go off and state that definitively, but the group that I worked with, they're American citizens, U.S. citizens, but they're Chinese nationals, and so they would go to China regularly. So they would go to China for 3 weeks, come to the United States for 2 weeks. In the end of November, the CEO of the company that we were working with came back from China and was, deathly ill. Ill to the point where he was just sick as could be. And his CFO, like a week later, and they're in the Los Angeles area, was a perfectly healthy woman, was admitted into the hospital for pneumonia. This was in, right before Christmas, 2019. And I am convinced, I have no doubt in my mind, that it was COVID. But yeah, to your point, I really was the harbinger. And we talked with our board and some of the investors, and I was telling them that this COVID thing was coming like a freight train. But yeah, I saw this thing coming well in advance because of my exposure to China. I've been working with China for so long, and the fact that they went dark. No emails, no phone, no commitments on when deliveries were going to come. It just, and then I started hearing rumors about, materials that are used in Pepsi and Coke going on shortage, and that told me, hold on a minute. Everybody drinks Coke and Pepsi. If there's anything easily to forecast, it's probably that. why are we having that type of problem on shortages? And that told me there was no one working. So yeah, I mean, we saw this thing coming a mile away.
I mean, I don't want to get into conspiracies here, but it seems like this is what people were frustrated about with the Chinese government, is that there was clearly something going on, and people try to keep it quiet. Again, I don't want to get into conspiracies because I don't know all the details.
Yeah, no, I don't blame them. I mean, because they didn't know what they were dealing with, right? Again, it's hindsight, but I do believe they did know, and I'm not, again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I think they did know, and it was over Chinese New Year, so they had this kind of natural break where manufacturing kind of goes into a lull and slows down over that time period. That was this sign too. They extended out their Chinese New Year because most of their employees are coming into a factory. They live there, and then they go home during Chinese New Year. So they didn't want people coming back to the factories, and that's kind of and we haven't recovered since, candidly, and that's why we're having the shortages we have. But anyways, hopefully that ties into the financial cloud. My point.
No, that's really interesting.
Yeah,
so
I mean, that's why I sold my business, and there is correlation to it. It's all about timing, right, and figuring out valuation and figuring out, is this the right thing, and it probably wasn't in hindsight. There was something we probably could have weathered.
And now a quick message from our sponsors. If you are a trader or interested in trading, I strongly recommend you check out the Financial Cloud. I've personally spent a lot of time in the last couple of years learning trading, following different people, and joining different groups. But as soon as I joined the Financial Cloud, I was blown away and immediately knew this was the best resource out there. It was like finding a diamond in the rough, especially in the world of trading where there's a lot of charlatans out there. I'm such a fan that this is actually the only ad where I personally reached out and requested that they let me promote them. So that should say something. I attribute a lot of my own success in trading to the Financial Cloud, and I love the team there, so I'm more than happy to help spread the word. I've also got several of my family and friends to join. My favorite feature is the live chat. So for literally the entire market day, I'm listening to professional traders calling out plays and describing what they're seeing. There are also algorithms they've built that notice unusual activity and instantly call them out to alert you. And I'll admit I was skeptical about bots at first until I saw how effective they were. So believe it or not, these plays are now the core of my trading. And of course, there's also the Discord group with a huge active community, nonstop education, and classes offered as well. Quite honestly, they do not charge enough for all the value they provide. Sign up via the link in the show notes to get a 7-day free trial and 50% off your first month. Or you can just use promo code RICH, R-I-C-H. And within that time period, you'll know if it's worth it. In my experience, it's been a total no-brainer. All right, let's get back to the show. Do you feel, if you feel comfortable, because I heard about some big wins that you had from Tom.
Yeah.
Whatever you feel comfortable sharing. I like to share the big wins and big losses. Any kind of information you can share so people see the gamut. It's not just, hey, I made 6 figures in one day. There's also some bad days too.
Yeah, I've had bad days. I've had good days. I mean, the most that I think I've had on my account, was over 200,000 on a win. I've also had a 65,000, 70,000 multiple. I've had a couple of those where losses, and so you can wipe out gains and as easily as you make it. To me, while those are exciting, and no doubt it's it's fun to post and say, hey, look, I just had this this huge win. It's the steadiness to it, right? Because those big trades, to be honest, if I'm asking myself why and what did you do, Bryan, to make that happen? Some of it was, squeezes that you kind of identified. The Financial Cloud played a huge role in that. And I mean, some of those tickers I've never in a million years would have known about. But there wasn't anything that I would say I could pinpoint and put some hard facts as to how can I replicate that again, right? So there's a little bit of a sense of a gambling aspect. I don't want to use that term because gambling is, it's just odds, right? And I don't want to say that there was more than odds going into it.
Or luck.
It's right, or luck is another way to say it. And there's plenty of that. But to me, it's the steady gains, right? It's being able to preserve your principle. And then, for me, the hardest thing I have as a trader is discipline, right? And so I can't watch my screen every second, right? And so, I may hear something or I read something that says, hey, this is a great thing, and I go in and I overweight a trade, and I'm now in deeper than I want. All of a sudden, there's a quick downturn, and I find myself now trying to make up, for that loss by even doing bigger trades. And those are the cycles you got to get out of as when you're with this. And Financial Cloud does a great job in that. I mean, for me, what I really value that they bring is it's not just saying, hey, go buy Tesla and it's going to 750. It's not that. It's here's the reasons why, and there's different approaches to it. Some will use Elliott wave theory, some will use momentum, some will use volume. There's a lot of different ways that they're determining as to what's there, and it's cool to see how that comes into, because then the luck is, there's always an element of luck, right? News trumps everything. You never know what's going to happen, and the market can turn down in a snap, and you can have these flash crashes. But if you understand kind of what is going on at the sentiment at the macro level, and then understand these technical points, then trading becomes something that's manageable, and you just got to manage your risk.
Yeah, it's important to keep that mindset, because I personally, for example, to illustrate the point that you're trying to make, I had a large win with I don't know if you remember the day Fastly dropped like a rock, because the
So I've got a story on
All
that,
right.
but keep going.
So I was going to say, I actually had a lot of puts on Fastly at that time.
So did I.
So I had a very large win. I was right? But you can't let that get to your head, because, yes, I had puts on it because I thought it was overvalued. It ran I remember it went to 120 from $30. It was a crazy.
It was around 115 and it dropped to 90 in a second.
Exactly. I was right that it was overvalued, but I didn't think I was going to be that right. I got helped out by the CEO putting out a statement, and then the next day you wake up and it's a huge win. So, what's your story there?
So it happened after hours, if
Yes.
I remember correctly. And if I remember correctly, it was TikTok or something. They lost an account. I can't remember what account they had lost. And I had a decent sized number of puts. For me, I think I had $30,000 of puts in that play. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to take the 10% because you're not going to shun a $3,000 gain. But I sold it literally right at close, and I'm watching it.
Well, you exited your puts, right?
I exited it right. Literally right at the end of trading, and I'm sitting in my truck, and all of a sudden I look on my phone on Thinkorswim, and I see this enormous red candle, and I just sat there, and you're just looking at it going, are you kidding me? And it goes both ways, and that's the reason why you got to manage your risk, you got to be disciplined, because it easily could have gone up, right? They could have announced, hey, we're bringing on whatever account, and all of a sudden I'm upside down. It's the reason why you've got to be happy. They always say you can't go broke making a profit, and you may have made more. So that's when you come back and you learn and you understand. But anyways, that's my Fastly story. I remember that distinctly.
You would have had if you had 30,000 in puts, that would have been a massive. That might have been your best win, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, yeah.
So how do you overcome the mental aspect of that as a trader? Did it bother you the next day, or are you like, whatever? I made my 3,000. I took off risk, and next day.
I don't remember what happened the next day, but I can speak to what I've done in the past, specifically, to situations like that. Sometimes it's just best to walk away and not trade. There are some days you don't have to trade. And that's something that that I've got to learn, what to do, because you can have a big win, or you can have a big loss, and you can compound that loss because you're thinking about what happened yesterday, and you've kind of got it's the big rage, I guess, and it's an awesome show, but it's like Ted Lasso, right? I don't know if you watch Ted Lasso.
I don't, but I've heard of him. Yeah.
It's great, and there's a line that he uses, and that's be a goldfish, and the thought process behind being a goldfish is, forget about your mistakes, just move forward, right, and don't let it bother you. Press forward and keep going, and there's an element of that, and not to say that you shouldn't remember, because there's a reason you feel pain, right, and whether it be emotional, whether it be physical, it's to tell you, hey, guess what? Don't do that again, right? Or try and avoid it, right? And so, that's, you need to feel that pain,
Yeah.
and you can't get numb to it. If you get numb to it, then things are you're playing with monopoly money at that point, and that's where it gets
No,
gets pretty.
you're right. I've definitely had some very painful moments too. I remember on the flip side, not being able, like I remember Amazon before their most recent earnings, I had a small call position, and I was like, all right, I'm going to get out right before close, and it didn't fill. And then the stock just cratered. So that was a painful moment as well. But those things fuel you as long as you learn from them to get better going forward.
Yeah.
So I guess that leads to my next question. If you could go back to yourself when you were starting, or talking to your kids about trading now, what advice would you give them or give yourself if you could go back in time?
Patience. And that's the one thing that I hope people, as they listen to this, and the financial cloud, I know preaches it, but you're not, you read about, we talked about this at the beginning of the podcast, there's this idea that you're going to become a millionaire quickly, and that you see stuff on Twitter where someone turned $5,000 into $1 million, and that's honestly, that's amazing, but that's really, really hard to match and to replicate, right? And that's where it goes back to, we talked about some of my big wins where they're over 200,000. It's like, that's phenomenal, that's great. Well, then I also had some big losses, and the idea that you can just get the steady, consistent gains above and beyond what you would normally get investing, compounds, and you win, right? You're 25, let's say, and you're beginning to trade. Don't expect to be a millionaire by 30. Not saying it can't happen, and not saying that can't be a goal, but you've got a lot of time ahead of you, right? And so be smart, be consistent, and that compounds over time, and then you win. I mean, those are true principles of just putting money to work. There's peaks and valleys. You just got to know. It was funny because I was running. I love to run, and I'm in Salt Lake City, and I get up in the morning, and with the timing of light right now, you get the sun over coming up over the Wasatch Mountains, and you see these peaks and valleys of the mountains, right? And I look at that, and it just shows you how much trading's on my mind. I'm looking at that, and I'm like, that's a graph. Look at that, and I'm starting to think, like, would I trade there or not? And as I'm running towards these mountains. Because they're silhouetted against the sky, right? And it dawns on me that life it's like a lot of like life. You're going to have peaks, you're going to have valleys, you're going to have wins, but you just got to be consistent. And you're not going to have a graph that's going to go from 0 to $1 million in a year. If you do, that's phenomenal. Put that money away and never touch it again, and then start a small account again, or put something there and try and get consistent gains, because there's a reason why you don't hear a lot of traders that are worth $500 million. I mean, because of what we're talking about. You just, it's hard. I'm not saying you can't do it. It's just hard.
Yeah. So it's funny you talked about compounding. I have my most popular TikTok got like over 500,000 views. It went a little viral. Was about the power of compounding gains. And I know Tom has a video about this as well on YouTube. What are realistic returns? Like when you talk about steady, slow and steady gains, compound them, what's realistic so people have an idea?
I mean, like if you're getting 25, 30% on your investment a year, you're winning. I mean, that's the reality. Now, do I think, as your nut or your nest or your investment, your principal gains and gets bigger in value, it's harder to sustain a 25, 30% growth, right? If you have $10,000 and you're investing $10,000 and you do it right, I don't think there's any reason why you couldn't get a 400, 500, 600, even 1,000% return on that investment if you do that right within a year. To say you can do that on, let's say, a principal amount of $1 million, that's a lot different, right? So it depends on how much money you have. It depends on where you are, and how what you're willing to put at risk, what your risk tolerance is. But if I'm 25 years old and I've got $25,000 that I'm putting to work, there's no reason why I don't think that person, if disciplined, use tools like the financial cloud, do your own research, become educated. That's one thing Tom is. Tom's an educator. And listen, and you check your ego at the door, There's no reason why that shouldn't be $50,000 at the end of the year, in my opinion. Whether the market goes up or down, because there's price action both ways. And so, the market doesn't necessarily have to go up to make money. You've got to understand some of those principles. But that's my belief. I mean, it just, again, it depends on the amount you have, what you're doing. But I think you should be able to get at least a 20, 25, 30% return. That's what you would see typically, like in a preferred or a private equity type investment, if you were to take that off market and let someone else do it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, first of all, I love the answer that you gave, because a lot of the critiques people have with, like, for example, my TikTok. Oh yeah, why don't you just do that and become a multi-billionaire? Just keep going, keep compounding. And I think you hit it right in the head. It's totally different compounding $1 million and compounding $10,000. Right? There's the law of diminishing returns. As you have a bigger and bigger nest egg, right, it's harder and harder to get those big returns. And as you
No,
I was going to say, as you alluded to before, with the inflation that we're experiencing now, the old days of just making 10% a year being great is not great now, because with inflation, you have to kind of get that at least to just get by.
You do, and I don't think, again, I don't want to go too much off on the inflation aspect, but I do think that people need to take that into consideration. That a 10% return right now is not what it was 10 years ago. That's for sure. And so the value of money is different, and it's yet to be seen what this quantitative easing is going to do on a monetary policy. But yeah, I mean, you've got to keep and then when you get more and more money, I would not suggest that you constantly put it into trading and do those things. I mean, you got real estate, which is a great investment. There are other tools and vehicles that you can certainly use.
So one thing I'm just really curious about before we move on from this topic is, we seem to agree on inflation. Personally, after COVID, because of the education that I had, I saw major inflation coming, and I pivoted my portfolio to mostly scarce assets like gold, silver, and Bitcoin. So I'm curious, have you made a similar move? Do you are you into Bitcoin, or do you not see?
I was. I got out of it, I think when it peaked in the spring. That scares me, in part because, and this is important. Trading can consume you. I mean, it can consume your after hours. It's going to consume your day. It's going to consume your weekend. There's a lot of work, and that's something I think people need to understand is, you've got to create a plan. If you don't have a plan, then you're just relying on someone else. And no offense to any of the guys on TFC, it scares me that sometimes I'm listening to a 25-year-old and I'm putting work based off what they say, or money to work based off what they say, without having some. And I've done that, and they know what they're doing. Don't get me wrong. And I do it more often than not, to be candid. But I think you need to have a plan and do some work. But it can also, going back to the Bitcoin and alt currencies and whatnot, digital currencies, it trades 24/7, right? And so sometimes I need downtime. Sometimes I need to just watch a movie, or go throw my baseball with my son, or talk to my wife and go to dinner. And there are moments where, honestly, I'm so preoccupied, because it's addictive. I mean, there's an addictive nature to trading, and you've got to be really, really careful with it, where it just consumes your mindset. And so you've got to have balance. And it's one of the reasons I love to run. It's one of the reasons why I look for other avenues to preoccupy my time and get focused. And you don't want to get to a point where you're so focused on it and that you kind of lose perspective and get sucked in. That's what scares me about Bitcoin. Not that it's not an asset that's going up. It's just that I can't take a break from it. Whereas with trading, equities or options, you've got at least that break.
Right. That makes sense from a trading point of view. So why did you decide to join the Financial Cloud and pay for it? If anyone here listening is considering the same thing, what made you decide to do it?
Well, I mean, number one, you're investing in yourself. I like I said, when I started following these guys on Twitter and kind of seeing their success, I had a skeptical eye, kind of to where and how things are done. But it's not a lot of money when you look at it from the whole scheme of things, particularly when you're talking about returns and the education you're going to get over time. It's worth every penny, in my opinion. And I think it's, and I don't want to state exactly what it is because I may get the subscription rate wrong. But it's for me, I look at it as an education. I'm either going to pay myself. I make investments in myself all the time. Why not put it towards education? That's how I look at TFC.
So what's your favorite benefit from them? Because they have they've got the newsletter, they've got all these different things in the Discord. Me personally, I think you mentioned it briefly in the beginning. I like trading can be very lonely, right? So you're by yourself, You're on the computer, you're by yourself. I love being able to listen to that voice chat and like hearing other people also trading and talking you out of things or talking you into things. So that's my favorite. What do you think is like your most valuable feature that they give you?
They give you if you listen and you're willing to learn, they're going to give you the tools to believe in yourself, right? And I like that. Certainly, I don't know. I mean, I've DM'd them here, and every once in a while we'll connect. But you do have a sense of who they are as people, and so it's this. There is a connection there to the point where you say it is one. I would say that honestly, it's one of my favorite things about it. I mean, I feel like I know Tom. He's going to have a baby, and I'm like, well, God, should I get Tom a present? And I, in all seriousness, I've sent Tom, not to give, I've sent Tom some of these, right? And he's got a kid, and I'm like, tell me if you like him. And I sent him to Avery, and he likes, he's out there, working out. I mean, here's another aspect to it, and this is really cool, and I, hopefully Tay's okay with me saying this. I reached out to him. I'm from Utah. I'm a big Jazz fan, right? And he's on the Grizzlies, and they played in the first round of this most recent playoffs. And I just say, hey, look, love your work. I love the fact that you're an athlete, that you're actively involved in trading, and you're really good at it. And I love that you've got this physical specimen that's like in the 0.1% of the world, right? I mean, he's got every physical talent that I can't even dream of, right? And he's got it. That's awesome. But he's also got this mental capacity that's off the charts, right? So I sent him this note. And he's like, hey, that's really nice. I appreciate that. By the way, do you want tickets to the game? And so, he's like, how many do you need? I said, can I take my kids? And so we went into the Jazz Memphis game. I think it was game 5. And I never even got to say, to him personally, like, thank you, right? Because he's down on the court. There were COVID restrictions, a lot of things going on. But that was cool. I mean, that shows that there's a community element to it that's really, really cool. And they really do. I mean, certainly they're for business, and they want to make money, and they should. I mean, they're putting their time and their talents to work. But they care about it, right? They care about the success. They celebrate people's wins, and they also they feel for you when you lose, right? And so, I don't know. To me, it's a really, really cool entity. I don't. I haven't gone out and spent a lot of time on other Discords or other groups that are out there, but I do like the idea and I do like who they are as individuals. And to me, it's you're gaining it. They're genuine people, and it just makes it an enjoyable experience.
I love that anecdote, and I totally agree. That's part of the reason why I've spent so much time interviewing people on their board, people in their group. I just like those guys. I think they're genuine guys, and they have a good mission of trying to help people. And I've gotten to know them, I think, pretty well. And it's hard to fake that, right? That's genuine. Good people trying to help people learn how to make more money. So that's why I feel comfortable promoting them. And I think anyone that's listening, if they're interested in checking it out, I'll have a link to everything in the show notes. Feel free. If you don't feel like paying for it yet, I think that they do offer some free parts of their Discord that you can join. But all that stuff will be in the show notes for everybody to check out. Otherwise, Bryan, if there's any last parting words that you want to give?
No. I mean, also, it was great. I enjoyed it. I didn't know quite what to expect on this interview. I've enjoyed getting to know you better, Ishmael. And I'll say that, Financial Cloud, Tom, Avery, Tay, all those guys, they're fantastic. And it's not just guys. There's women on there. And, as you can see, I'm kind of the old guy probably on that group. I can guarantee it. But, I don't feel like I, don't belong there. And so, whoever you are, whatever you're looking at, I'd highly recommend it. It's worth every penny. And I'm not getting anything out of this. I'm giving them stuff. They're not giving me anything. So other than education. So I like it. They're great guys and highly recommend it. And I appreciate the time.
Awesome, Bryan. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
One quick reminder before I let you go to join my email newsletter. It's going to be like a personal note for me to my friends of all the cool things I've come across that month. From hacks and tips, interesting stories, products, books, ways to make money, and who knows what else. It's totally free, and if you don't like it, you can always opt out at any time. The link to join is in the show notes, and I hope to see you on the list. And there you have it. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to leave a review. I may even give you a shout out and read yours out on the show. For any and all resources that we discussed, check out the show notes or head on over to boundtoberich.com. Until next time.